Shamata, welcome to our new season of Dharma Speaks. Today we have an author who is well renowned in writing about dharmic scriptures. He is Dr. Vineet Aggarwal. He is practicing in pharmaceutical industry and he is by academics a doctor. And he's been writing since a long time and great books which actually talk about a lot of things which are science and also about itihasas. You will listen to more about how science is intermingling in Dharma and how we can be more, exploring things about what is different Vedic scriptures, what are the Upanishads, and how they are very important in our life. So listen to the podcast and ensure that you do whatever he says, because there are great things which he has told in this podcast, and we would like every one of you to understand why he is saying that. Thank you. Shamata. Shamata, Vinitji, thank you for coming all the way. When I welcomed you, I actually told a word called Shamata. Let me tell you the meaning of that. It comes from the Upanishad, Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, which actually means, may peace and tranquility be with you. And when we say peace, it looks tranquility is same, but when we say tranquility is well-being of your physical well-being, mental well-being, metaphysical well-being, this mantra of greeting is given to us by our Gurudev. So, Shamata, and thanks for coming to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Pavanji. It's my pleasure completely to be here and to learn from you everything that your Guruji has passed on.
Thank you. So, let's start with a quick background of yours. Like, how did you get into Sanatana Dharma? I know you are a doctor, Vineet Aggarwal, and you are MBBS doctor.
Right.
So, how did your journey into Sanatana Dharma happen?
So, I think, Pavanji, first, there's a very big misconception amongst people that, people of science don't really believe in God or don't, have faith, rather, and faith and science are considered two opposites. And I think that comes primarily from the Western concept of science and faith, where you do see a conflict, and you've seen it historically. Since the time the heliocentric model was proposed, first by Galileo, and then, it was kind of proved by Copernicus, and it's a historical truth that they were summoned and their theories were questioned. They had an inquisition, and Copernicus was asked not to publish or not to talk about his work. So I think there is this inherent misbelief between the two systems, I would say, that comes from the Western upbringing that we get. But in the Indian context, I don't think I've ever felt, out of place in either of those two streams, having faith as my foundation while studying medicine, or vice versa, while delving into what are termed the religious scriptures and finding science in them. I think that was where my fascination began. Journey actually started in 2011 when I started a blog called Decode Hindu Mythology. Now, mythology is a very loaded word, so we'll get into a discussion on that later. But back then, that's all I knew. And I figured that, there are things that I was going through while reading scriptures that made a lot of logic to me, a lot of sense, and a lot of scientific principles I could find hidden in them, embedded in them, in the stories. And I could sort of understand that these stories were elaborated or they were embellished to pass on something more meaningful, right? It's not just about how someone behaved with someone else, or what he did or she did to him or her, but it's also about passing a message. So while growing up, you're always told these moral lessons from the stories, but there's more to it. There's historical lessons. There's about the culture. You get to know so much about what were the beliefs of the people, what were the scientific beliefs of the people. So kind of all of that amalgamated in that blog, and I think that's the path I'm still following. That why go to an extreme, if you can find a middle path, right, between the two.
Middle path is something which is very, very helping people to understand what it is, and it will help people for building their behavior and character. Thank you very much for that quick start. So when I started looking at understanding Sanatan Dharma, I saw many profiles, and one of them was you, who actually tells things very, very beautifully. And when I saw details in Vedic scriptures or in Itihasas, I think it was mind-blowing to me. I was like, wow, when can I meet this person? So thank you for coming to us. So coming to the time part of it, and science is something which we love, everybody loves. So coming to mixture of that science, now we understand that we are in Kali Yuga, which is Yugas, and a lot of times we hear that Kali Yuga is bad or something. So first of all, if you can tell us what are the 4 Yugas, how are we divided, and if you can get the construct behind it, I think it will be great for our viewers to get the basics. So I know you would have done it earlier, but our viewers are very special. They would love to know more science about it. So if you can just help us.
Definitely, Pavanji, and thank you for your kind words. I think for me also, that was one of the most fascinating things that I read while going through scriptures, that they talk about not just hundreds of years or thousands of years, and there's calculations that go into millions and billions.
Yeah.
The very fact that they had calculations going up to, so many zeros, that shows, one, that they were very good at mathematics.
Perfect.
Secondly, they had some means to know more about the world than we know today.
Right.
Because our current stories, the scientific theories, I would say, not stories, but the theories, scientific theories that we have, in the end, they're all stories, right? Because we can't prove half of what we believe, even in science. So, but these theories are built on observations from, advanced telescopes, Hubble's space telescope, etc. And, scientists are doing investigations day in, day out, and then they're arriving at something which is very similar to what the rishis had written down in the scriptures thousands of years ago. So, I mean, it boggles my mind, how they did it. But coming to this specific question about the yugas, so there's a cyclical, time is cyclical, first of all, in Hinduism. In Western religions, it's more of a linear progression of time. Whereas in the Eastern religion, the Eastern mythologies, time is cyclical, it's never ending. It's a continuous cycle of birth and destruction and decay, and again, birth, rebirth. So whether it's an individual or whether it's a universe, there's a cycle which is followed. So for a universe, I think I would approach it from the opposite end.
Okay.
Rather than starting from a yuga, I would approach it from the macro perspective and then go deeper. So for a universe, first of all, there are multiple universes, mentioned in our scriptures. There's a multiverse happening.
I'll reserve my questions on that.
Sure. So for the time period, for each universe, is the life of the universe is Brahma.
Okay.
So Brahma is the creator. We all know he's the creator God, right? So the moment Brahma is born, the time of the universe begins. And as soon as Brahma, finishes his life, you can't say it dies because it's not in
it's not a human being
sense of the word. Correct. But Brahma has a lifespan of 100 years, which is 100 Brahma years.
Brahma years, okay.
Right. So the moment that lifespan is over, the universe dissolves.
Okay.
So Brahma's 100 years are actually divided into 360 days and nights. Every year has 360 days and nights.
Right.
Now each of this, it's very similar to how we human have calculations, right? So we have a 365 days in a year. Brahmaji has 360 days in a year, and it's standard, right? Every year is 360 days. Each of these years is called a kalpa.
Kalpa, okay.
And each kalpa, like our day, is divided into 14 manvantars.
Okay.
Like our day is divided into 12 hours.
Right.
So I'm not talking about the night right now, because in Brahma's night, it's dissolution again. Nothing exists. So we're talking only about the daytime, and in the day, a day has 14 manvantars. Now, just as our hours have seconds, the manvantars also have a subdivision, and each manvantar has 71 mahayugas.
Wow.
And each mahayuga has a cycle of 4 yugas.
Wow.
So that is the, from going from the macro to the micro, and currently we are in the Kali Yuga.
Okay.
And again, because each manvantar has 71 mahayugas.
Right.
So it's very important to understand where we are currently.
Which one we are.
Which one we are in right now, and which year of Brahma is actually going on right now. So our scriptures are beautifully descriptive in the sense that, they tell us exactly where we are.
Beautiful.
And multiple Purans mention that half of Brahma's life is already over.
Okay.
So 50 years have already gone.
Okay.
And this is the first day of his 51st year.
Okay.
So he's officially hit midlife today. And we are in the afternoon of this day.
Okay.
So out of the 14 Manvantars, we are currently in the 7th Manvantar.
Okay.
And because each Manvantar has 71 Mahayugas, we have finished 27 of those, and we are currently in the 28th Mahayuga cycle.
Okay.
And in the Kali Yuga.
Excellent.
So that's where we are. So about 155 trillion human years have gone by for this universe.
And this all is there in scriptures.
This is all there in the scriptures. It's all, the entire calculation is given.
My goodness. And people just say these are like just basic books you read and you don't know.
Because people don't know what is there in the books. I think, Pavanji, and that's why, I would like to really thank you and, others who are bringing out this knowledge through different mediums, through inviting different guests, because there's a lot that we don't know.
Yes.
Even as a practicing Hindu, you do not know.
Correct.
Even 10% of what your religion is about.
I think it's a blessing for us to you coming out and talking about it, because there are a lot of people who have knowledge. And there is one person who actually told me that they don't come out.
Right.
Why should I tell? It's okay, man.
Right.
Like, what will happen if I don't tell?
Right.
It's like similar to what will happen if I don't vote.
Right.
So I keep telling people, whenever you know, please go and tell.
Yes.
Imagine you wouldn't have written that blog. I'm sure we wouldn't have been talking like this.
Definitely.
So I think it's a great thing. And for the numbers you told, I think it just blew my mind. And imagine the magnanimity of where we are in. We think we are doing great and oh my God, saal kaise guzra, we don't know. And we are talking about billions of years of one day of Brahma.
And this is just one Brahma.
One Brahma.
One universe.
One universe. So on that universe, and I like this director called Christopher Nolan, who actually dharmified the science. And his movie, Tenet, if you have seen it.
Yes,
right?
I have.
It talks about 7 multiverses.
Right.
And they've decoded the movie. I saw it 7 times and I tried to understand. I think I understood.
So each time for one universe?
Yeah, kind of trying to decode, and I saw multiple YouTube videos to understand the movie. So he talks about the same person being there in multiple multiverses.
Yes.
So is it true in our dharmic sense also?
So I would say, we definitely have stories of the multiverse. We definitely have stories of similar titles being existing in the different universes.
Right.
For example, there's a story about Brahmas, multiple Brahmas being there. Now, of course, it may not be the same Brahma that we have here. As I understand from the scriptures, it's not the same person. It's not like the same person in a parallel universe.
Okay.
It's a different person with a similar responsibility.
Got it.
So each Brahma has the same task. He's the creator for that universe, but it's a different person. It's a different universe.
Understood.
So it's not exactly like a parallel universe, but it's a multiverse in the proper sense of the word. That it's a different universe with its own different.
It's running there separately.
It's running separately, with no connection with our universe.
So there might be a Dr. Vineet somewhere, somewhere talking about to Pawan Valluri.
Let's hope so. Let's hope we are doing the same thing there as well.
We should. So in that sense, so there is a lot of science embedded into our Shastras. That's why we call it Shastra, which is the science part of it.
Right.
Now, but when we always say that currently, and that's my version, you can actually say it's right or wrong, our science has not evolved that much to figure out what is happening. Do you think it's right, or you think, no, Pawan, I think that we are too good, you know everything? Or like, what is your thought about how much science should learn from the scriptures?
No, Pavanji, I think as I said in the beginning also, these are all theories, right? Even the scientific theories, most of the theories we do not have the proof for. We are trying to gather that evidence through all these telescopes and looking into the sky and, trying experiments and in conditions that simulate the vacuum of the space, etc. But we do not understand space. If you see the exploration that has happened, actual exploration, even if it is mechanical, human beings have not gone beyond moon, right? No. But even within our solar system, our mechanized robots, the robotic satellites, the Voyagers, etc., they have not managed to fathom the depths of this solar system.
Yeah.
completely. So there have been observations, of course, centered around the planets
Correct.
or the moons.
Yeah.
But solar system is much more.
Yeah, I
Right?
know,
It's not
yeah.
just the planets.
Correct.
So we have focused only on the planets. We don't even know what else is there. We do have an idea, but we have not. There's no evidence that we have
Evidence, yeah.
gathered, real evidence that
evidence.
we've gathered. It's based on scientific theories which are sound, and it should be like the way it is described. But still, there is no proof, I would say. So if we have that premise in the back of our mind, I would say there is a lot that science can learn from other streams, not just scriptures, from other streams.
Understood.
Definitely. If you just see how life behaves under the water, in the depths of the oceans, you see life forms that you cannot imagine
Yeah.
can exist. And similar life forms could be there on other planets, right? Whenever we're looking for life, we're always looking for a radio signal. We'll believe aliens only if there's a radio signal. If we see a UFO in the sky, why? It could be an alien life, which could be more primitive, or it could be in a different form, or it could be least bothered with us. They don't want to contact us, right? So I think there's a lot of scope in science, and scriptures do provide a lot of food for thought. I would say, I wouldn't say that everything that we read in the scriptures, again, because it cannot be corroborated. It's a matter of faith. We believe, yes, it is so.
Yes.
But again, we cannot get a proof, just like our modern scientific theories.
Correct.
But a lot of food for thought can be gained from these scriptures. A lot of discussion. In fact, there are theories floating around that, Hitler and all those people in World War used a lot of Sanskrit, scriptures to design vimanas and etc., which could be true. You never know, right? They were doing a lot of research. Germany, even today, Sanskrit is a very popular language in Germany.
Germany, yes.
So there is a lot that we ourselves don't know about our scriptures. And again, Sanskrit language is one issue. Hardly how many people in India today know Sanskrit, right? It's not a part of our curriculum in most states. It's a rarity to find somebody who's learned Sanskrit in school.
And that's why we are actually speaking in English, which
Right.
is not our language,
Exactly.
but we need to go to many people in our country.
Yes.
That's why we're speaking in English.
Yes. And I think there's so much more hidden in the scriptures that will get revealed. And fortunately, with internet, it is getting revealed.
Yeah.
And more people are learning about these things that were hidden in the texts, obscure text somewhere in some Himalayan monastery. It's like the Doctor Strange movies you see, in that library. These are all these texts hidden. But now I think internet is bringing out these texts.
Yeah, I think that's a great revolution, I would say.
Definitely.
For I think science helped a lot
Yes.
to get these scriptures out
Yes.
and make it available. So
And now science should gain from it.
Should, yeah. And it will gain.
Yeah.
I like ChatGPT, for example. AI was there since 50 years. Nobody
Yes.
knew.
Yes.
And now everybody's talking about it because it became consumed
Right.
by easily. Now, if we can get our scriptures consumed very easily,
Yeah.
I think this is one of the model which we are trying to take scriptures. And what I personally believe is whether Rama existed, Krishna existed, we can figure out. But what can we learn from Rama? To me, to behave like Rama. To me, to behave like Krishna. To me, to behave like Draupadi. To me, to behave like Rukmini. That's more important
Definitely.
than saying whether did Rama exist, man. Come on.
Definitely. And a lot of people get stuck, unfortunately, on that aspect. Oh, no, but this is not historical. So, but it is not historical. There's so much more that you can learn, even if it is not historical. I would say it is historical, yes. I would argue because there are
You have
proofs.
to, definitely there, yes.
But even if you believe it is not historical, there's so much more that you can learn from it.
Correct.
Why give up completely on a scripture just because someone told you it is not historical?
Yeah.
You have not done your research, right? You're not a historian, you're not an archaeologist. Just because for all these years, we have been told that all these are myths. And that's where the word mythology comes from.
Yeah.
So I think we should ourselves take that responsibility, we as Indians. And I would say it does not matter what language you speak, which region you belong to. Now the scriptures are available everywhere through the click of a button. They are available in most Indian languages. I would say all Indian languages.
All of them, yeah.
And even a lot of foreign languages. Most of the scriptures are available. So why not explore ourselves and find out things?
On continuation of that multiverse, now we know Rama, we know Krishna. Now, one quick question. Is it the same Rama of Treta Yuga of ours? Or we are talking about the Maryada Rama of some other Yuga or Kalpa? I think, because you just opened my window of which Yuga should I speak to? 17th, 18th, I don't know. So, if you can just help us, the Rama, which we always talk about, is it like multiple Ramas?
So there have been multiple Ramas,
Okay.
for sure. There have been multiple Krishnas. There have been multiple avatars,
Avatars.
of the Lord. And in fact, there's a very fascinating story of a being who's shaped like a crow, and he's called Kak Bhushundi.
Okay.
So this particular being, even though he is in the shape of a bird and that too a crow, he survived multiple pralayas, and he mentions, in a scripture called Yog Vashisht, and he's talking about, how many times he's seen Ramayana happen and how many times he's seen the Mahabharata happen,
Okay.
Narsimha avatar happening thrice, and stuff like that. So we know that things sometimes repeat themselves.
Okay.
But there's a very common belief that every Mahayuga the same things happen.
Okay.
That is not true. At least not as per the scriptures.
Okay.
So scriptures do not mention that every cycle the same things happen.
Okay.
Sometimes, the things may repeat over eons.
Oh.
Because there would be a probability, right,
Right.
of the same similar circumstances leading to a similar kind of a tussle.
Right.
But so that's based on probability. So it will not happen in every single Mahayuga.
Okay.
So Mahabharata that we know is from the current Mahayug, 28th Dwapar,
28.
just before our Kali Yuga began.
Excellent.
And Aryabhatta, who's actually one of the greatest
Greatest sage,
scientists considered in India, mathematician, etc. So he gave the date of 3102 BC
Yes.
for Kali Yuga to begin. So just before that, till that was Dwapar Yuga. And Mahabharata is from this time period. So about 5,000. That's why we say it's about 5,000 years old. But the Ramayana is from Treta, which was the previous Yuga, but not the 28th. It is from the 24th Mahayuga cycle.
Okay, so it's further lakhs of years ago.
Yes. Further
Nice.
back in time.
Okay.
And if you just put it in context, so Parshuram avatar, which was the previous incarnation before Sri Ram, he appeared in the 19th Mahayuga.
Okay.
In the 19th Treta.
But he's still Chiranjeevi?
He's still
Even now he'll be
yes,
there.
Yes, because he has a role to play in the life of Kalki.
Kalki, yeah.
Which is the fourth avatar after him.
Right, yeah.
So, so these timelines, as I said, they run into hundreds and thousands of years.
Wow.
And Sri Ram was not in the current cycle; he was in the 24th cycle.
Nice.
And similarly, there are dates given for all the avatars, all the major events that have happened in our scriptures.
So it actually, makes me confused that what people actually say. So I'll take this word confused because that's the most used word for current generation people. Because they come to say, why can't you give me one book? Okay, why can't you give me one reel? Let me come to one reel now. Can you explain entire Sanatan Dharma in one reel? People asked me. Like I said, we are talking about Vedas, which are like Himalayas.
Right.
Whatever written is only probably a Mount Everest level. And you're asking me to get one rock and saying, explain me the entire Veda. Possibly, one do it. But I think I was telling very funnily, if Veda Vyasa comes today, he'll be asked to write Mahabharata in 30 seconds.
Right.
I don't have time to listen. So going back to that dharmic concept, Sanatan Dharma, that since you have done very good research on dharmic things, if you can tell us one quick story, because people love stories, and if you can tell something, because we come with clear understanding that we can learn a lot of characteral behavioral thing from ethics and morals is still there. That is changing based on time. Right. Today it might be ethic or moral, but tomorrow it might not. Okay, right. We'll figure that out. It's based on yugas. Yeah. We have lakhs of years, so we'll change. But when it comes to behavior and character, I think that is dharma. Yes. That will sustain for long, forever. That is why it is called Sanatana.
Yes.
So if you can tell us one story where people can learn, and if you can keep it in a minute. Yeah. I have wrong expectation, but
we're aiming for a reel.
We should. Story. That's what people would like to listen first. And if you can tell any example story, Mahabharata, Ramayana, any epic.
Sure. I think before going to a story, I would just like to highlight that, there are already commentaries that are available on all the scriptures available.
Correct.
So, of course, our level of understanding, our intellect is going down with each passing yuga. That is how it is supposed to be. But there are acharyas, there are rishis and sadhus of the ancient times who knew this was coming. That is the reason the Puranas were penned down by Vedvyas, so that people who cannot understand the lofty ideas of Vedas or Upanishads, the metaphysics, they can understand through the medium of stories.
Right.
That's the reason why Puranas were written down, and that is why you find a lot of out of this world stories in the Puranas.
Okay.
Yeah, because they have been turned into something which is a little more memorable.
Okay.
For it to be passed down to generations.
Right. Yeah.
So, and I've given this example in a couple of other places also when we're talking about science in the scriptures, that there's a very popular story about Chandrama, about the moon god, and he marries 27 daughters of Daksh Prajapati.
Okay.
Now, one of these is his favorite. Okay, so who's called Rohini.
Okay.
So Chandrama or Soma and Rohini, they are like the favorite couple of Devalok.
Okay.
And everywhere he goes, he's with Rohini, and the other sisters start getting jealous, and they complain to Daksh Prajapati. Now Daksha says that this is not fair, right? It is not fair. You have married 26 girls, you have to spend equal time with them. And Chandrama, he's shown as a very rebellious young god.
Okay.
In most of the stories that you find about Chandrama, he's a rebel, and he does not conform to what has been followed through. So a lot of teenagers will identify when they read his stories. So he says he refuses. He says that she's my favorite. I want to spend time with her. And Daksha curses Chandrama that you will die of consumption slowly, right, over the next 14 days. And that's how the concept of waning of the moon comes, Now, is it a real story? How would you say? You can't judge, but you definitely see the waning of the moon. And we know it has something to do with the phases, right? The amount of sunlight that the moon is reflecting. So where it is in its orbit, depending on that, it gets the sunlight which is reflected, which, comes down to us at different phases. So the stories, and again, if you plot the course of the moon in the 27 zodiacs, you see the names of those girls are the names of those zodiacs.
Okay.
And Chandrama spends the most time near the Rohini nakshatra.
Oh, in that constellation?
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
So out of the 27-28 day month of the moon, maximum time period and closest in terms of distance, it is to Rohini.
Okay.
So definitely one led to the other, right? It was either a scientific observation that resulted in the creation of a story that passes on this beautiful concept or observation that there are 27 zodiacs that Chandrama passes through. And each day he's in a different zodiac. And the maximum time spends with Rohini.
Whether the story gave this or this gave the story, doesn't matter actually.
Doesn't matter.
The knowledge is still
exactly.
important.
That's what I feel, that we get bogged down by this discussion about what came first or whether what is correct, this is scientifically correct or not, this is whether we can prove it or not. It does not matter, listen to the story, see what is the moral, what is the message it's trying to pass on.
Correct.
And I think there's so many stories like that.
So I had a next question. I think you answered it straight away. Because my question was, how do you put science, spirituality and Sanatan Dharma together? The story actually explained it. The 27 constellations, zodiac signs, and a moon which is waning is been told in a Purana. And that is given to us in a very beautiful form of a story. And if a kid is listening to this and is interested to understand why a moon wanes, if they stop at the story, it's wrong. That's what the Purana says. Should go further. Purana says not the last thing.
Definitely.
So great. I think I am very, very happy that multiple questions are getting answered like multiverse.
And just to add to that, I think so Chandrama, people might have a question that, what happened to Chandrama? He didn't die. But no, he didn't die. There was intervention, divine intervention. So he prayed to Shiva.
Okay.
And the temple of Somnath in Gujarat is actually because Soma Nath.
Yeah, Soma, yeah.
So he's the lord of the moon.
Aha.
So that's where Chandrama is supposed to have prayed to Shiva for deliverance.
Oh, that's why you got Somanath.
Yes, yes.
Oh, we got the great secret now. I thought it was Somaras thing. I think I'm mistaken.
So Somaras, again, I would say, there's a lot of hidden scientific principles in that concept. There's, of course, a school of thought that it is related to the Amrut. It is related to the chemicals that are released in the body at the time of meditation.
Right.
But in our Vedas, if you read, there's an entire mandal. So I'm not sure how many people are aware. So the Rig Veda has 10 divisions.
Okay.
Each of them is called a mandala. The 9th mandala is actually completely dedicated to Soma.
Oh. Okay.
So can you imagine an entire mandala, one entire division of Rig Veda, 1/10 of Rig Veda is only about Soma.
Wow.
And it is about the extraction of Soma,
Wow.
identification of Soma, getting filtering of Soma, consumption of Soma, which gods is it offered to. So there is definitely some scientific principle that they're talking about. If we go to the basic level, it is probably as simple as a plant which was abundantly available, in the, and it is said that it is available only in the mountain areas.
Yeah, right.
And it is difficult to find. So there was a plant, and it's described as a shrub. So, there was a plant which was used in Vedic rituals, and it's neither its fruit, nor its flower, nor its leaves, its stem was used. And the stem was crushed.
Okay.
The juice that was extracted out of it, it was filtered through wool.
Okay.
And this golden colored liquid, it was then mixed with curd or milk or water, and then offered to the gods. And the descriptions that you read about, what happens when Indra consumes the Soma. And he drinks pots of Soma, ponds of Soma, before going to a battle.
Oh, okay.
So clearly, a lot of people have misrepresented it. They say that it's an intoxicant.
Exactly, yeah.
But why would you need an intoxicant when you're going to fight? Maybe a bit of it to strengthen yourself, but not pots of it, right? So you need a chemical that actually invigorates you. And that's how Soma is described.
Wow.
That, it gives you a kick. It opens up your eyes. It makes you more aware of the surroundings. So it's exactly like the adrenaline rush that we talk about. Now, unfortunately, nobody wants to do a study on what Soma could be. So, we come back to the same point, circle back to the same point that there's so much research which could be done if we just start reading scriptures with an open mind. And what are the possibilities? Imagine, we could discover something new. We could discover, since I work in pharmaceuticals, I know a lot of older drugs, they were directly derived from plants. Now they're all synthetically created. But a lot of older drugs. So for example, there's a root called Sarpagandha in Ayurveda, and it is used for hypertension. Out of Sarpagandha, the root, there was a chemical which was extracted, which is called reserpine. And this was one of the first antihypertensive medicines. So who's the fool here? If we are ignoring all this data which is there, and in Ayurveda, I'm not an Ayurvedic doctor, but I wish we were taught a little bit about our own Indian education, medical education system which used to exist, and what were their principles. In Ayurveda, they say that there is not a single plant which is not of use. Not a single plant, animal or mineral in this world which is not of use. So you can use something from someone in some form. So, so many herbs, you have either it's the root, it's the tuber, it's the leaves, it's the stem, it's the fruit, it's the flower, it's the bark. So there is so many ways. And imagine that these guys knew what worked for what.
Yeah.
Imagine the kind of research they would have done. I think it's just foolish. It's just foolish that we are ignoring all this.
And we are not even putting any efforts to add more research. It's actually becoming slowly death, which is very, very scary, I would say, because we are going more synthetic, more than natural, if you ask me. We are going more synthetic, and we are missing the things which we had great secrets lying.
Yes.
Thank you very much. I think, especially Ayurveda, I wanted to ask that question again. I think there is some sync which is happening. Little bit you are ahead of me, catching all my questions. so I don't know where we caught this, and you are answering my next questions. It might be cliche to say, and it might be scripted. People might think, but you answered me very important questions like what is Vedas, what does Upanishads, what does Purana mean in Sanatan Dharma was my next question. So you gave me a great option on Rig Veda, which is having 10 mandalas. Since we are talking about the lineages now, where gurus were looking at, what do you think, or where do you think we lost that link? Because I feel somehow if there was a guru for every village, and that has been seen in United States or other places, neighborhood school they say.
Right.
Anybody in around 5 kilometers, all people go to the same school.
Right.
And we had the same system of Gurukul.
Yes.
1000 years of year back.
Yes.
Even 200 years back we had,
Right.
before it was demolished by Mr. Colonial Cousins. I call them colonial cousins. They are colonial and cousins.
Yeah.
So we had that. Wasn't that a beautiful system, or what do you think? If you can just give me your view on our guru and why do you need a guru in case if you can help me.
So Pavanji, I think where we lost it is very clear when we got invaded multiple times over multiple centuries. The entire system was broken. Secondly, I think a lot of people don't appreciate it, but there was a very targeted campaign against the teachers, the priests, the Brahmins. So I'm not talking about a caste here. I'm talking about the vocation.
Okay.
Because Brahmins had the language, they knew the language, Sanskrit, they could decode it, they could misuse it also. But they were the only ones who could tell you what was written in the scriptures, right? And most of the invasions when they happened, and it's on record, you can read a lot of autobiographies of great invaders of the past, where they take pride in, saying that how they broke these systems. And in fact, I think that's where it started happening, that we lost touch. We didn't know the language. We didn't have the people who knew the language. In fact, it's so, sometimes I feel, it's just pathetic, for lack of a better word, that we Indians did not know our story till the Britishers started translating the inscriptions. We didn't know about Ashok. We didn't know about Harshvardhan. Even though there were books written about them, Harshvardhan was a great king in Kannauj, in modern UP, who is believed to have started the system of Kumbh Mele mein jo daan hai.
Wow.
Every 12 years, the daan concept that, whatever you give, he would give daan every 5 years.
Oh.
He would just completely empty his coffers. Imagine. And this was a king back in the 7th century, right? So these are people we didn't know much about. And the Britishers actually, some of them. So these are the kings that, we should have been taught about. They are like footnotes in our history today. As, we all know, most of the regional histories are not taught in the, central curriculum.
Correct.
Which is very, very unfair. It is not representative of the entire country for sure. And even the history that is taught of the Delhi Sultanate and the modern history, so-called modern history, all the contribution of the local rulers, the local leaders of the region is forgotten. So I think Guru Shishya Parampara, that is what it ensured. We stay, we know our roots first of all, and we understand where we are coming from, which is very important. Now you see a whole generation of Indians, they are all wannabe Firangs, right? We just want to ape West, and without understanding what. Imagine a beautiful tradition of lighting a lamp in front of a tulsi, a living plant, is scoffed at, but it's okay to decorate and light up a dead pine tree. It's just Western mindset, right? It's just Western brainwashing. Just because Hollywood has shown it to be cool, you want to ape it here. There are people who have Halloween parties. So you're basically dressing up as ghosts and goblins. But you don't understand the concept. The concept is that the dead are supposed to visit on that day. You're supposed to give gifts to them. And that is exactly what we do in the Shraddh period. What do we do in the Pitru Paksh? That's exactly what we do. We offer things that, that would probably help in our own mind, that we feel would help our ancestors. That's the same concept. When we ask somebody to do a shraddh for an ancestor, they say, oh, no, we don't believe in all that. But they'll gladly go for a Halloween party. So I think that's the impact the Guru Shishya, breaking of the Guru Shishya Parampara has had on our civilization. We do not know ourselves. We do not know that most of what we had was logical, was in sync with the nature. Now the new generations talk about having a sustainable future, equality, etc., etc. All these principles are already there in our scriptures. And I'm not pontificating here. I'm not saying that, oh, everything was there. It can't be. And, it can never happen. Times change, everything, the society changes. But the beautiful thing about our Shastras is that they say that with changing times, the rules should change.
Yes.
I mean, that's such an open-minded concept for something which was written thousands of years ago, where the Parashar Smriti, again, a lot of people criticize a book called the Manu Smriti, right? Manu Smriti is not even valid for the Kali Yuga. The Smritis are for different Yugas. So for each Yuga, there's a different set of laws that is to be followed. And for Kali Yuga, there is a book called Parashar Smriti.
Wow.
And this Parashar Rishi, he's related to Ved Vyas.
Okay.
Right. So this Parashar Rishi, he is the one who laid down the rules. And in that Smriti, he's mentioned that if people living in this age, and he mentions this is for Kali Yuga, and he says that, if people living in the age, they feel that, the rules are not suitable for them, so 10 learned people along with the king should sit and decide new rules.
And he states that.
Yeah.
When he's setting a rules, he's saying it can be changed.
So imagine the open-mindedness of our scriptures, of our ancients. And these were the gurus who taught.
Yeah.
And these are the ones who are reviled now, without understanding anything about them. What Ved Vyasji did, what Valmiki did, and coming from very humble backgrounds, what they achieved, I think it's mind-blowing. No author today, however best-selling he or she would be, they may make tons of money. They will not be remembered for thousands of years after they die,
And
just as these guys are. So there's a huge, I think, gap that has come.
Which was made because of killing the Guru Shishya Parampara totally, right?
Yes.
On that note, when you said people like to party Halloween rather than giving a Pitru Paksha, what is your opinion if we make it more fun of these things? Is it okay, or do you think it's it's dilution? You can't even touch those things. Those are pious. You cannot make fun through that. What is your opinion?
So Pavanji, I am, because I have been writing about science and religion, I think there's a lot of fun that I've had with that.
Okay.
So I'm I think more open-minded, and I feel that we should be open-minded. In today's day and age, the major problems that the world is facing is because people are not open-minded.
Okay.
Which should have been the opposite way, right? I would say maybe 10 years, 20 years, 30 years ago, the world was still more open-minded. With the coming of social media, we have all got into our echo chambers.
Oh.
Because we know who we resonate with, we hang out only with them, we share thoughts only with them. There is no diversification of thought. There's no exposure of the other side that we get. And primarily because of this social media, that you can connect only with those people.
Yeah.
You're free to do that. Otherwise, earlier you had 5 friends, 5 of you had different views, and you coexisted.
Correct.
Now, even if you don't meet those 4 people, you have 500 virtual friends to share your thoughts with, who will say, yes, you are right.
Yeah.
That gives you the ego boost. I think that is a major, thing that has happened. So I would say you need to change in order to preserve what is important.
Wow.
You cannot have the same way of storytelling, for example. You cannot have the same way of passing discourse or important lessons through a pravachan. It has to be, as you said, Ved Vyasji would have to be
Making an Instagram reel for us. Yeah.
So the audience has changed. The tastes have changed. The mode has changed of imparting education. You know, most schools are getting into interactive education instead of books.
Yeah.
There are no exams for students till 5th standard. We
Yeah.
could have never imagined such a
Right.
scenario, right? So there are things that are changing, and you need to change with time. I feel that is very important. You don't dilute it in the sense that don't make fun of it.
Mhm.
You can make it fun.
Yeah.
Just don't make fun of it. I think that is the fine line that we have to
And we should
balance.
not lose the essence and give
Yeah,
the respect.
without losing the
yeah,
essence,
Respect
yes.
if you give it.
Yes.
And I think that's where we always believe, and because we say dharma is not set of rules, because it has to change as per the current time and space.
Definitely.
Because if a rule in Treta Yuga, forget about even Mahayugas, Treta Yuga will not be probably worth putting it into a Dwapar Yuga,
Yeah.
which can't be put in. And as you exactly said, somehow Manusmriti is becoming like a big thing as a book, rule book, which somebody picks it up and says, shows you. But I've read Parasara Smriti, as you were saying. I remember the punishments which was more drastical than in
Yes.
Manusmriti. If somebody goes and reads, I think it'll be more different. But I loved the word when you said, I didn't
Yeah.
knew that,
Yes.
that he said, if 10 people and a king can change it,
Yes.
look at the sage.
Yes.
He's saying, he never said, I'm God.
Right.
You can change it if the circumstances changes. If there is a
Definitely.
social media, Instagram, change it.
Change
That's what
it.
he's saying. He's not
Yes.
saying, no, you have to go to only the Word document.
Yes. Yes.
So let me come to the next part of it, spirituality. You know, the word which I somehow personally, and not Mahagate side, but spirituality is, I would still say, little lesser than dharma, because it's more peripheral side. I'm okay with saying spiritual, but if people live at spirituality, then probably they are just reading the cover foreword of a book, and like they're not going inside. They don't want to,
Right.
because they love the foreword multiple times.
Yes.
So, but there is a lot of mindfulness. There is a lot of psychological things which are mentioned in our scriptures. If you can tell us few things about how any of the scriptures, be it Puranas or Itihasas, which you can tell us, which talks about more about mindfulness and things like that.
Right. So, Pavanji, I think, again, you know, it's a very pertinent question, because a lot of people, they think of philosophy as something, you know, which is otherworldly. You know, it does not apply to us, right? You know, what Socrates talked about, what Aristotle talked about, or, you know, because they don't know the names of Indian rishis.
Yeah.
So, they think philosophy is something which is otherworldly. It is not related to our everyday lives. The beauty of Indian thought, I would say, is that it marries